Happy Sunday. Hey, I hope wherever you are and whatever you're doing, I hope everybody that you love is doing alright. Let's get into how to win versus Skaven. Cool, but first thanks to all my patrons, all my, Mega Boss and Boss and Grot, and whatever I call them, patrons. The best way to support the channel is through Patreon, link in the description. Also thanks to Baron of Dice for supporting the channel. Get 5% off your order with code MDG at checkout. And of course, thanks Barbarian for all the art. Cool. Okay, so let's talk about Skaven. So here's what we're going to do, okay? First, we're going to talk about all the different Skaven rules. And I don't mean all of the rules. I mean the rules that are going to be particularly interesting. Because I don't know about you, but when I approach a game against an army that I'm not too familiar with, and my opponent is, going through that laundry list of rules at the very start of the game, I'm really only interested in the key sort of core set of rules that's going to be weird and different and difficult for me to deal with. Right? Like, I don't need to know, for example, a good example is Clan Rats. Clan Rats recur a D3 worth of models at the end of any turn. So, if you just tell me that piece of information, it's like, it's not super important to me. It's like, okay, you're going to be bringing back a few, of these screen guys, but it's probably not going to make a very big difference, right? So it's like, you can tell me that's okay, but if you skip that piece of information, that's also okay. So here are the important battle traits. Splinters of the Vermin Doom. Once per battle round, army, start of battle round. You can use this ability if there are fewer than 3 friendly gnaw holes on the battlefield. Set up a gnaw hole on the battlefield more than 9 inches away from all enemy units, more than 1 inch from all friendly units, and more than 3 inches from all objectives and other terrain features. So these gnaw holes are relatively easily set up because they're not super big. So they will kind of pop up around the battlefield. And at the very start of the game when you're playing Skaven, it's a good idea to think about where gnaw holes could potentially go. Just in rough sort of areas so that you understand, like, well, my opponent could pull one up here, right? So this is once per battle round at the start of the battle round. So even if it's your turn, your opponent is going to get to put a gnaw hole onto the battlefield. So you have to keep that in mind. Next rule, always 3 claw steps ahead. Once per turn, army, enemy hero phase. So this is in your hero phase, right, as the non-Skaven player. Pick a friendly non-monster Skaven unit that is not in combat and was not set up this turn to use this ability. This unit can use a normal move ability as if it were your movement phase. So in your turn, they're going to get to move units around the battlefield. So you got to be super careful with that. This particularly matters when it comes to shooting units for what's not called Unleash Hell, covering fire, right? The units are going to be able to move in the hero phase and then use covering fire. And some of the units, like Rattling Guns, for example, have a move of 6 inches. So you have to be a little bit careful. Gnaw-hole Ambush. So in your movement phase, the Skaven player's movement phase, pick a friendly Skaven unit that is in the tunnels below to use this ability. Set it up wholly within 6 inches of a friendly gnaw-hole and more than 9 inches from enemy units. So wholly within 6 of a gnaw-hole and wholly outside of 9 inches of all enemy units. So a standard sort of setup, wholly within 6 of the gnaw-hole. And another important thing to remember here is that Skaven can deploy their whole army in reserve if they want to. In their deployment phase, they have pick a friendly Skaven unit that has not been deployed. There are no restrictions. It doesn't say infantry, it doesn't say monster, it doesn't say hero, it doesn't say half. It says pick a Skaven infantry that has not been deployed and set up that unit in reserve in the tunnels below. It has now been deployed. So a Skaven army can take their whole army and set it up off the board. So that's interesting. But just something to keep in mind. But I would say that those are the serious rules that you have to sort of pay attention with Skaven. Okay, battle formations. There are 2 battle formations that I think that people are taking that are scary and good, and so we're just going to look at those 2. So the first one is Scryer Prototypes. Once per turn, army. So it's in your shooting phase, so this turns into once per round in the enemy Skaven player's shooting phase. So we have to think about, okay, so pick up to 3 friendly Scryer units to be the targets. So Scryer units, there's a lot of really good Scryer units. I think from what I understand, Scryer is kind of the faction that Skaven, that GW has put more time into for Skaven. So these include units like Arc Warlocks, Doom Flayers, Doom Wheels, Lord Screech, Vermin King, Rattling Guns, Storm Fiends, Warp Lightning Cannons. So it's lots of good units, right? So you can pick up to 3 friendly Scryer units to be the target of this ability. And it's up to 3 of them too, right? It's 3 of them. So keep that in mind as we keep reading. So roll a die for each target and apply the corresponding effect. On a 1, it's D3 mortal wounds on the target. On a 2 through 5, you add 1 to wound rolls for the target's shooting attacks for the rest of the turn, and 6 is more and more power. In addition to +1 to wound for shooting attacks, you also add 1 to the Ren characteristic of the target's ranged weapons for the rest of the turn. So adding 1 to wound is really scary, because some of these, like for example Rattling Guns, hit on 4s. And so if you have, let's say, 3 units of Rattling Guns and you roll 3 dice, the probability that all 3 are going to go off is pretty high. The probability that, you know, the one that matters is going to go off is also very high. And so if you get +1 to wound, you can also get +1 attack, and all of a sudden you're hitting on 3s and 3s instead of 4s and 4s. So this ability is really scary, and keep in mind, you can also move these units before shooting in the enemy's hero phase before you use covering fire. So, and it's once per turn army in your shooting phase. So this doesn't work with covering fire, fortunately, but it does still like buff up whatever shooting units your opponent has. This is the sub faction for shooting. If you ask your opponent what battle faction they are, and they say, oh, Scryer prototypes, it's like, okay, so you have a shooting army. I know you have a shooting army before you even put your models down on the table, right? If they are not that, then they're probably this battle formation, Prized Creations. Once per turn, army in your hero phase, so this is the Skaven player's hero phase, pick up to 3 friendly non-hero Molder units to be the target. So, what units are Molder? Molder units. I think that, if I'm remembering correctly, I think that clan rats are. Nope, they're verminous. So who are the big Molder units then? Let's see. Hellpit Abominations, Lord Screech, Vermin King, Master Molder, Rad Ogres, Storm Fiends. So this is definitely more of like a melee centric battle formation. And it's the same idea. You pick up to 3 friendly non-hero units to be the target, and you roll a die. On a 1 or a 2, not just a 1 this time, inflict D3 mortal wounds on the target. On a 3 through 4, add 1 to the attack characteristic of the target's melee weapons until the start of your next turn. So this is for your turn and also in your opponent's turn if you're the Skaven player, right? So it's going to last the whole round. And if you get double turned, it'll last a little bit longer. And through a 5 or a 6, in addition to the effects of Rabid Infusion, which is +1 to the attack characteristic, the target has a ward of 5 up until the start of your next turn. So you get to do this to 3 friendly non-hero units, and the probability is 1 is going to self-destruct, 1 is going to get +1 to attack characteristic, and 1 is going to get +1 to the attack characteristic, as well as a 5-up ward. So if you have... So this puts the Skaven player into some interesting positions where they can, for example, do this ability on 2 units that are sitting right beside each other. One of them gets a 1 and one of them gets a 6. The one that got a 1 sits back while the one that got a 6 charges in to blow things up and have a 5-up ward and just be generally scary until the beginning of the Skaven player's next turn, where they get to do this all over again. So as you can see, both of these battle formations are like random, with Prize Creations being more random because there's 2 dice that you fail, but there's also 2 dice that you sort of crit, as compared to the shooting one, right? The prototypes where there's only a 1 fail and a 1 like bonus overkill sort of ability. So the shooting is going to be more consistent. So if we're moving on to heroic traits now, here's a few heroic traits. We have Scurry Away in any combat phase. If this unit is in combat on a 3-up, it can immediately retreat, and it doesn't take wounds from what I remember, because I think that's another Skaven sort of like core ability that doesn't really matter, right? That we don't need to talk about because it's not going to change how you as the player make your decisions most of the time. Right? If you're watching this video, it's because you're trying to see how you can beat Skaven, not because you are a master at playing against Skaven and and you're looking for the finer points. You're looking for a general overview, right? Cool. So Scurry Away, fine. I don't know, there's some heroes, I guess, that you can put it on, but some of the bigger, scarier ones are named. Like, for example, Vizix Scour is named, Thanquil is named, but you could put it on a Grey Seer or an Arch Warlock or something, right? But overall, kind of meh. Short-Tempered is a passive. Add 1 to run rolls and charge rolls for friendly Skaven units while they're wholly within 13 inches of this unit. So this is awesome if you're going to play like a more forward, you know, small foot hero or non-named hero, and you're going to play like a melee sort of based list. You give 1 to charge for your, you know, your Storm Fiends or Rat Ogres or whatever as you're moving in. Rat Ogres, I guess. Skilled Manipulator is another passive. While this unit is within the combat range of a friendly non-hero Skaven infantry unit. So, for example, this could probably be Clan Rats, but Rattling Guns are also infantry. What else is infantry in this list, or in this, because it has to be non-hero, right? So, Rat Ogres, Storm Fiends, Storm Vermin, units like that. It has a ward of a 4-up. That's pretty good. Each time you make a successful ward roll for this unit, you basically kick off the damage to the infantry unit that you're standing next to. So if you have like an Arch Warlock that you don't want him to get picked off for whatever reason, or like a Grey Seer you don't want to get picked off, you can sort of give him this 4-up pass off wounds to Clan Rats who are going to recur models and stuff. So I think Skilled Manipulator is one that you'll probably see quite a bit. Short-Tempered you'll see, in, like I said, in melee-based lists. And Scurry Away I don't think is super good, because you're trying to keep most of these units out of combat, so you don't have to do a 3-up, right, to try to get away. But let me know in the comments below if I'm off here about anything, right? Skaven is not my best army. Moving on to Artifacts of Power, we have Foulhide. End of any turn, heal D3 this unit. That's fine. Again, I don't really know who you're putting it on, because you're not putting it on any named heroes, like or any unique heroes like Thanquil or Lord Screech Vermin King or Vizix Scour, nothing like that. So it'll be going on probably a smaller hero, and then healing D3 is not impactful, because if they get tanked, they're probably dead anyway. Warpstone Charm, any combat phase, pick an enemy unit in combat with this unit to be the target. On a 3-up, subtract 1 from save rolls for the rest of the turn. Same kind of thing. It's like, I don't know who you're putting this on. Like, you don't want to put this on the units that can take it, if that makes sense. The units that can't take it, like putting this on Thanquil would be sweet, but you can't. So, Skaven Brew. Once per battle, any combat phase, pick a friendly non-hero Skaven infantry unit wholly within 13 inches of this unit to be the target. Inflict D3 mortal damage on the target, then add 1 of the attack characteristic of the target's melee weapons for the rest of the turn. This is probably what you're going to be going with. This is even pretty decent on Clan Rats. Like, Clan Rats hits on 4s and 5s with no rend, right? And 1 damage and no... They have crit auto wound. So if you can add extra dice into this, like if you can go from 2 attacks to 3 attacks, that's a lot of extra dice. I think it's 60 dice instead of 40 dice, right? For Clan Rats, you're adding an extra 20 dice. And then because they have crit auto wound, you're going to, you know, bypass that 5-up to wound. So... even on Clan Rats, like this can sort of have them punch up in the weight class a little bit. So I think that this is probably the one that you'll see most often in Skaven Brew. But again, if I'm wrong, let me know in the comments below. So let's look at some spells. So first of all, lures don't matter, haha, because we're still in a manifestation meta. But let's pretend that we're not. Let's look at their spells. Well, first of all, we can see that all 3 of their spells cast on 6, and Skaven have some +1 casters. So, and some other casting shenanigans, like for example, the Grey Seer has an ability where you roll 3d6 instead of 2d6, and if the casting roll, well, you get to remove 1 of the dice, right? So you always get like best 2 out of 3 dice. So casting on a 6 is not really tough if it's best 2 out of 3, right? So Skitter Leap, this is a good one. This is their unlimited spell. Pick a friendly visible Skaven hero unit wholly within 13 to be the target. Remove the target from the battlefield and set it up again more than 9 inches away from all enemy units. So this is a standard teleport, but it's unlimited and it's only for heroes. So you can sort of bounce these heroes around. This would be way more efficient if we were in an edition where you could still have like 5 heroes and have a bunch of little priests and wizards running around and just sort of teleport them all over the place to deliver whatever spells or manifestations that they have. But because that's not the case, you're probably only going to have like 2 or 3 heroes, right? So, but still, it's a great ability. Like the mobility with Skitter Leap and Gnaw Holes and everything else is fantastic. Next up, we have Wither. Casting on a 6 again. Pick a visible enemy unit within 13 inches of them to be the target. Inflict D3 mortal damage on the target. Fine. You're casting a manifestation instead of a D3 mortal damage, right? So, Warp Gale. Again, on a 6, pick a visible enemy unit within 18 of them to be the target. The target has strike last for the rest of the turn. So, like, overall, like, these 3 spells are really good. A teleport for heroes, just a flat D3 mortal wounds to the target, or mortal damage to the target. And then an 18-inch strike last. Like, that's cool. Just on a 6, right? Strong spells. Manifestations of Doom. Summon Warp Lightning Vortex. This is a 3-part manifestation, and they get set up pretty far away. All 3 pieces have to be set up wholly within 18, and then they sort of get set up in like a triangle, or do they still have to do that? Then set up the second and third parts exactly 7 inches from the first part and exactly 7 inches from each other, so they form a triangle. So it's like it's quite a large triangle, and it's quite far away from you. It takes up a lot of space on the board. And then, do I have... Oh, I should definitely have the manifestation things, right? So essentially what the Warp Lightning Vortex does, we just look at it here, right? So it's got multiple parts. So here's the really crazy part. Subtract 2 from run rolls and charge rolls for enemy units while they're within 6 inches of this manifestation. In addition, if any unit passes across the manifestation, inflict D3 mortal damage on the enemy. So you don't, it's sort of like shackles. It's used like shackles, right? Where it slows you down, like -2 from runs and charge rolls. And if you move through it, you just take D3 mortal wounds. And they also have in any hero phase, if it's not set up this turn, pick an enemy unit within 6 to be the target. And on a 4-up, it takes D3 mortal wounds. So if you move through it, you take mortal wounds. And at the start of, during any hero phase, if it wasn't set up that turn, you can also start to like ping things for damage. So it's annoying. Like I said, it's sort of like shackles, and it's used in very similar ways. So it's quite strong because shackles is strong. Warp Vortex has a passive. Subtract 2 from the run rolls and charge rolls for enemy units while they're within. Oh, that's different. Sorry, I'm getting these things mixed up somehow. That was a Warp Lightning Vortex, right? The Warp Vortex is something different? No. Oh, I see what I did. I see what I did. They're all the information's here on the screen. Okay, good. So that's one. So then we have Summon Vermintide. This is another manifestation. Casts on a 7. Set up a Vermintide wholly within 13 inches of the caster and more than 9 inches away from all enemy units. It has an ability called More Rats. At the end of any turn, heal D6 this manifestation. So the Vermin Doom is like a little... It's like sort of like a Scuttle Tide. It's like a little thing of rats, and it just moves around and attacks stuff. But it heals, right? The rats sort of keep coming, right? So, so that's fine. I mean, being able to heal D6 for a manifestation is fine. I don't think it really does very much damage overall, right? 13 attacks, 5s and 5s. But it's annoying. It's hard to get rid of, and it has a ward of 6. And then last we have the Summon Bell of Doom. Summons on a 7. Has to be set up wholly within 13 inches of the caster and more than 9 inches away from all enemy units. Has an ability called Toll of Doom, which is a passive. Subtract 1 from wound rules for attacks that target friendly Skaven infantry units while they're wholly within 13 inches of this manifestation. So the Bell of Doom sort of sits there and provides like a defensive aura for your units, right? Right, subtract 1 from wound rules for attacks that target friendly Skaven infantry units while they're wholly within 13. So that's fine. This is going to be a piece of tech that's going to be really strong against some armies, right? Greenskins, this isn't really a problem for us because generally our wound rules are pretty good. But if you're playing like Daughters of Cain and you have a pretty weak wound and it goes from like a 4-up to a 5-up, it's going to be really hard and annoying to deal with. So the Bell of Doom is more like a piece of tech that we don't really have to pay attention to in our army. Noxious Prayers. So we're casting 2 prayers on 4s and 1 prayer on 5. Filthy Crust, which casts on a 4. Pick a friendly, visible Skaven infantry unit wholly within 13 of this unit to be the target. Add 1 to wound rules for the target's combat attacks until the start of your next turn. On an 8-up, they also have crit mortals until the start of your next turn. So giving something crit mortals is sick, especially if you remember that we have other abilities that are like a spell, for example, that's going to give +1 to the attack characteristic of our units. So crit mortals stacking with extra attacks is really strong. All of a sudden, clan rats throw 60 dice and are going to deal 10 mortal wounds, right, with crit mortals. So you have to sort of be careful. They can they can buff those lower sort of clan rats into actually, you know, not being like really punchy, but being punchier than you would think, just because of the volume of dice. Throw some buffs on 40 attacks, right? And all of a sudden it's like, you know, scary. So you got to be careful with these prayers. Bile Torrent, also answered on a 4. Pick a visible enemy unit within 13 inches of the caster or of the chanter to be the target. Then make a chanting roll. Roll the number of dice equal to the number of models in the target unit. For each 5-up, inflict 1 mortal damage on the target. So this is a 13-inch Horde Buster, standard Horde Buster. But on an 8-up, it's a 4-up instead of a 5-up. So this can be really scary. This can be really scary against things like Herd or Stabas, Shootas. Anything that only has 1 wound in it is scary. Against things like Gut Rippers and Ardboys who have 2 wounds, this is less scary, but still, like a reinforced unit of Gut Rippers being 20 models, like rolling 20 dice and 1 out of 3 is a mortal wound is still kind of scary. So, and then if it's, you know, 20, if we're doing 10 mortal wounds on 4-ups, to a unit of reinforced Gut Rippers, like that's still a sizable amount of like it's 5 dead Gut Rippers or 5 dead Ardboys, right? It's scary, so you got to be careful of these prayers. Rabid Tough answered on a 5. Pick a visible friendly Skaven infantry unit wholly within 13 inches of the chanter to be the target. Subtract 1 from wound rolls for attacks that target that unit until the start of the next turn. And on an 8-up, add 1 to the save rolls. So again, this is another -1 to wound. So you can see how Skaven with their prayers and their manifestations can stack -1 to wound. So again, not Greenskin, but other armies, you better watch out. So let's talk about some key units. So there's a few units that I wanted to talk about. Look at this fantastic artwork here, by the way. Very fantastic. So first, I wanted to just mention some of the heroes that you're... So I think in the vast majority of lists right now, what you're really going to see are Greyseers, Arc Warlocks as 2 heroes for sure, and definitely Rattling Guns. Greyseers are a 1 wizard for 120 points that get that ability where you roll 3 dice and you get to take 1 out when casting a spell. So Skaven is going to be pretty consistent in their ability to cast their manifestations and their spells, which is scary. The Arch Warlock is a wizard 1. But really what the Arc Warlock has is this ability called Overseer of the Engine of Coven, I guess. If a friendly Scryer unit, which includes like Rattling Guns, uses covering, is wholly within 13 inches of the target, and they use covering fire, they don't have to spend a command point. Which is kind of BS, right? Because we were always told that we were not going to get any more like command points or free command points or things like this, but here we are. And then Rattling Guns. So Rattling Guns are really scary because, don't forget, so they have a 6-inch move, but they can move in your turn before covering fire. So they have this 15-inch range, right, that they can shoot, but they can move 6 inches in addition to that. So the range is actually kind of larger than that, right? You have to be careful because it'll get you. 3d6 attacks, but this +1 to wound just gets to go down +1, right, because of your sub-faction ability, right, where all the shooters get to roll dice, and on anything but a 1, this is going up to a 3, and then covering fire is free, right? So it's like on your opponent's turn, on the Skaven's turn, they can be hitting on 3s and 3s, and with covering fire, they still are hitting on 5s. But still, like, it's so much dice. 3d6 for a reinforced unit with 6 models is a lot of dice. So these things are scary. These things are scary. They also have crit 2 hits, so the number of wound rolls that you make, and if you're getting +1 to wound, exploding hits is even better. So Rattling Guns are quite scary. It's really what makes this army a shooting army. But there were some other heroes that I wanted to talk to about as well. There's Thanquol the Bone Ripper. Thanquol is a little expensive at 360 points. He's a little bit of a bigger model, but he does have a cool... He is a wizard too, with a 5-up ward. So he's got a 4-up save, 14 wounds, and a 5-up ward, 8 inches of movement. So he's kind of a little bit of everything. Like, he's one of those heroes that fits a few different roles and kind of does them all okay. Just being a wizard too, and he has +1 to cast, right? So he's a 2-cast wizard with +1. That right away makes him scary. Gobsprak is more... I think Gobsprak's 380 points, right? Gobsprack is faster, but he's just about as tough. Doesn't have +1, right? So he is, Thanquil's actually quite scary. If you see him on the board, just remember that's what he's going to do. He's going to fight okay, he's going to shoot okay, but really he's a +1 2 cast wizard with a 5-up board. He's going to be hard to get off the table. Another hero I wanted to give a mention to is a Vizix Scour. I think right now he's maybe a little bit overpriced at 450, but you might very well see him on the table. He is a priest too, and also has a 5-up board, and he's a War Master. Which Thanquil is as well. But what was his thing that was really good? Right, you can once per battle, your hero phase, you can reroll chanting rules. So if you really need that prayer to go off and give crit mortals, well, you're gonna get a much better chance. So I'm sure there's other things about his War Scroll too. We don't really see him very much right now, but I think he's really strong, and I think in the future that this will you'll definitely see him on the table playing against Skaven. Oops. So battle tactics. So one thing about Skaven, because they're able to set up their gnaw holes, they're going to be really good at take their land and take the flanks. Seize the center, I think they're going to be a little bit harder. Skaven doesn't really have any like really strong anvil units that they can just march into the middle of the table, but they are pretty scary. Attack on 2 fronts. Again, these are going to be. Skaven does a pretty good job at scoring tactics. If your opponent knows what they're doing at all, it's going to be tough to deny Skaven tactics. One thing that you can do to help deny battle tactics to Skaven is try to keep those gnaw holes off the table and try to limit where they're actually able to go. But there's a lot of different things that they're going to be able to do. So, how to win. So, covering fire is going to be really difficult to deal with for some of these armies. Ironjaws in particular. The idea is that the enemy is going to get to use covering fire against you as an Ironjaws player before you get to charge. And because they deal so much damage and some of our units are actually kind of paper thin, I'm thinking Ragers, right? Like some of our units are actually pretty weak. So you have to be very careful with Ironjaws when you're approaching like Rattling Guns. And I think the real way to deal with them, if you can, is to try to get everything that you have on the board to go into your opponent's Rattling Guns. Like, just send it. Just send it. But be very careful about what unit you end closest to your enemy. Because if they're going to get to covering fire, make sure they're covering firing into something like Ardboys. Right? Into something that you can, like, that's a little bit tankier, that you can use a few models. And then in the charge phase, the Ardboys don't have to go in. They can just Porcupine, provide a cover, but everything else. I'm thinking specifically Kragnos here. Right? Like Kragnos, Ragers, Ardboys all approach Rattling Guns. Ardboys eat covering fire. Kragnos and Ragers go in. Right? Ragers strike first. Kragnos finishes whatever's they're up, even if they have a screen, because they're definitely going to be screening. Right, they're definitely going to be screening, but you're not going to be able to really do much if you just send in like one unit at a time. They're just going to get blown off the table. So when you do decide to go into the enemy, you have to make sure that you're going in all the way, right? And also don't forget to that, like at the beginning when you're thinking out your plan at the beginning of the turn here, don't forget to that with Scryer prototypes, right? Oh no, it's not Scryer prototypes. What am I thinking of? Right, it's +1 to wound, but that's only in their shooting phase. What am I thinking of? Oh no, it's always 3 claw steps ahead. Right, so in your movement, in your hero phase, right, before you've moved, you have to really think hard. This is going to be one of those like gotcha things. You have to be very careful about this. Right? When it's your turn as the Ironjaws player, at the end of your hero phase, after you've selected your battle tactics and cast all your spells and everything, your opponent is going to move their Rattling Guns. Right? They're going to move the Rattling Guns. So, that's scary. And then as another thing, too, you have to keep in mind that Rattling Guns also have this ability to, well, if they're close to clan rats, they're not visible, right? They get they're like invisible outside of 12, right? So, which brings us to Cruel Boys. So you're gonna have to sneak your Bolt Boys into that 13-inch range and shoot at the, right? But it's at least you get to shoot them before they shoot back. With Cruel Boys, if you have a reinforced unit of Bolt Boys, you sneak them. They're within 12 inches of the rattling guns. They shoot at the rattling guns. They're probably going to remove a bunch of the rattling guns, right? That's kind of what we're going for here. Rattling guns have a range, or have a 6-up save and no ward. So if you can get within 12 inches of them and they're visible, right, and you have that line that shot, you're going to use Hasty Shot. And because Hasty Shot just has the 1 rend, so that's going to be still no save, but we're doubling the number of dice. So you want to just try to melt away as many of these rattling guns as possible. Let me just double check one thing. From what I remember, rattling guns should be... They do have 3 wounds, right? So you're going to have to shoot pretty good. If we just look at some of our damage here, right, with Bolt Boys. Let's see, where's our Bolt Boys? So we're doing Hasty, right? It's like against a 6-up save. We're going to be able to get rid of, 4 of those rattling guns without any kind of bonus, right? If they're obviously in our opponent's general's regiment, we're gonna have a little bit of an easier time. But that's kind of the trick to getting rid of the shooters, is just to counter shoot them. This is, I think, what Bolt Boys are best at, right? Because they like low save, sort of infantry units, I think, is where Bolt Boys are going to be at their best. You can also sneak onto gnaw holes. Your opponent puts gnaw holes out, they're not defending them, you can just sneak a unit of monster killers right on top of them and then just start fighting them to get rid of them. So you can use that. That's a good trick you can use as Cruel Boys. And for gets, trolls can kind of take the gunfire heat, so you can just make sure that trolls are the closest unit for covering fire. But besides that, you're gonna get slapped. Lots of those like bounders and hoppers, or squigs, or most units, you just have to be very careful with covering fire. You have to make sure that you're choosing what unit is closest. So if you have some trolls, keep them within covering fire range, right? And then after that, in the charge phase is where you can go in with your bounders and your herd and everything else. So you just have to be very careful and watch out for covering fire. Covering fire is very, very strong. So what did I miss? Any other tips for Ironjaw's, Cruel Boys, or Gloomspite kits that you can use, that you can throw down in the comments below to help our friends, help our greenskin friends here beat up on Skaven? Please do let me know. But if you do nothing else, make sure that you like, subscribe, and wah.